Every time you look up at a skyscraper going up, there's always one question nobody asks out loud. How on earth did that crane get up there? It's one of those things you've probably walked past 100 times without thinking twice about. And without that crane, there would not be skyscrapers. So, how does a crane get to the top of a 2,000-foot building? And more importantly, how do you get it down after a building is complete? The answer is genuinely one of the most clever pieces of engineering you'll ever come across. For most of human history, the height of a building was capped by one simple, brutal reality. You can only build as high as your crane can reach. Early construction used derricks, basic frame and pulley systems that were slow, inefficient, and couldn't go very high. So, for a long time, the idea of a 1,000-foot skyscraper wasn't just architecturally ambitious, it was mechanically impossible. The problem is this: to build tall, you need a crane. But to put a crane that tall into position, you'd need an even bigger crane. And that bigger crane, you'd need a bigger one for that too. It's a loop with no exit. Engineers for decades were stuck staring at this paradox, knowing what they wanted to build, but unable to figure out how to actually get a machine high enough to build it. What they eventually figured out changed construction forever. Not by building a more powerful crane, but by building a smarter one. A crane that could grow with the building it was constructing, feeding itself upwards section by section, using nothing but its own hydraulic power. Before that breakthrough could work though, the whole thing had to start from the ground. And that foundation is far more extreme than most people realize. Before a single piece of steel goes up, crews excavate a massive pit and fill it with what becomes the crane's anchor, a reinforced concrete foundation that can weigh over 400 short tons. That's roughly 800,000 pounds of concrete and steel rebar, and it's often poured in one continuous operation, so there are no weak seams. The reason for this is physics. A tower crane is essentially a giant lever, and the forces at its base don't just come from the weight of the steel above. They come from every load it lifts and every gust of wind that hits it 500 feet up. Miscalculate the foundation, and the whole thing doesn't just wobble, it topples. The foundation is the part of this story no one ever talks about. But without it, nothing else is possible. The foundation is only half the battle, though. Now comes the part where things get genuinely bizarre. How does a crane that can't fly actually get off the ground? Once the foundation has fully cured, large mobile cranes are brought in to do the heavy lifting for the first and only time. They stack the initial mast sections, which are the vertical spine of the tower crane, one on top of the other, each section bolted directly to the one below, with high tensile steel bolts torqued to exact specifications. This base stack usually gets to somewhere between 50 and 100 feet before the mobile cranes drive away. From that point on, the tower crane is completely on its own. That moment when the mobile cranes leave is actually significant. The tower crane sitting at 100 feet with its jib attached and counterweights loaded looks impressive, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. To build a super tall skyscraper, it might need to reach 800, 900, sometimes over 1,000 feet. So, how did engineers crack the code on getting it higher? The answer traces back to the 1950s and 1960s, when Australian engineers were pushing to develop a crane that could raise itself without outside help. The climbing mechanism that emerged from that era became the defining technology of the modern skyscraper age. Without it, buildings like the Burj Khalifa, which topped out at 2,717 feet, would have remained a sketch on paper. The One World Trade Center, the Shanghai Tower, the Ping An Finance Center in Shenzhen, all of them exist because engineers solved the self-climbing problem. Today, a typical tower crane mast section is about 20 feet tall and weighs several tons. The crane can be configured to add these sections repeatedly, growing in tandem with the building floor by floor. Getting the assembly right on each jump takes careful coordination, and the tolerances involved are tight. Laser alignment systems on modern cranes monitor straightness down to about 1/10 of an inch over every 100 feet of height. A deviation larger than that could put enough lateral stress on the mast to cause a failure. Understanding the history is one thing, but watching how this actually works in real time is where your brain starts to short circuit a little. Here's where the engineering gets truly wild. The key component is called the climbing frame, sometimes referred to as a climbing cassette. It's a large box-like steel structure that wraps around the mast just below the crane's turntable, which is the rotating unit that lets the jib swing 360 degrees. When it's time for the crane to grow, this frame is what makes it happen. First, the crane uses its own hook to lift a brand new mast section up from the ground. That section, weighing several tons, is maneuvered into position at the base of the climbing frame. Then the hydraulic rams inside the climbing frame fire up. These rams operate at thousands of pounds per square inch of pressure. And what they do is almost hard to believe. They push the entire top assembly of the crane upward, not a small piece of it. The whole top, the turntable, the operator cab, the jib stretching out 200+ feet, and the concrete counterweights that can alone weigh tens of thousands of pounds. The combined weight of everything being jacked up in a single move can exceed 150 tons. As this mass rises, a 20-foot gap opens up inside the climbing frame. The new mast section is slid into that gap, aligned precisely, and then pinned and bolted into place with high-strength grade 10.9 bolts. The hydraulic rams retract, the load transfers to the newly installed section, and just like that, the crane is 20 feet taller. The whole sequence takes a skilled crew a few hours. Repeat it enough times and you have a crane sitting 900 feet above street level. For the operator inside the cab during a jump, the experience is unlike anything else on a construction site. The entire workplace rises underneath them, a slow, groaning hydraulic ascent, with the city dropping further below through the cab windows. Interestingly, data from crane safety reports shows that around 3/4 of all climbing failures are traced back to incorrect hydraulic pressure settings during this exact phase, which tells you just how much precision is required at the moment of maximum mechanical stress. Now, here's the question that actually keeps engineers up at night. What happens when the weather turns and a 500-foot steel tower has to stand its ground against a storm? A tower crane above its freestanding height of about 200 to 300 feet is vulnerable to one thing above everything else, and that is wind. The higher it goes, the worse this problem gets. To stay stable, the crane gets anchored to the building itself every 10 to 20 floors using steel collars and structural struts that bolt directly into the reinforced concrete floor slabs. At that point, the crane and the building become a single interconnected system, each depending on the other. When that system works, it handles wind forces that would otherwise be catastrophic. Steel struts connecting modern cranes to buildings can manage wind pressures generated by storms up to around 90 miles per hour. When it doesn't work, the results end up in the news. On April 4th, 2024, a tower crane at the Gables Riverwalk construction site in downtown Fort Lauderdale collapsed while workers were in the middle of a climbing operation. A 27-year-old worker named Jorge de la Torre died when his lanyard was not connected to an anchor point, and he fell with the collapsing section. OSHA later cited contractors for corroded and cracked pins in the climbing frame and failures in fall protection. The section that came down also didn't just hit the ground. It landed on a bridge and crushed 2 cars. Then came Hurricane Milton in October 2024. In St. Petersburg, Florida, where winds hit over 100 miles per hour, a crane at the luxury residences at 400 Central Condo Tower partially collapsed and slammed into the office building across the street, leaving a hole in its side and scattering bricks. The mayor had flagged the crane as a risk the day before the storm made landfall. Florida state law at the time actually prohibited local governments from enforcing crane safety regulations, meaning cities had no authority to require the crane be secured or taken down. Here's the counterintuitive part. Most cranes are actually designed to survive storms through a feature called weathervaning, or free slewing. When a storm is expected, crane operators release the slew brake, which allows the crane's jib to rotate a full 360 degrees freely with the wind instead of resisting it. The front jib, being longer and heavier, naturally orients itself with the wind direction, minimizing the surface area exposed to the force of the gusts. A properly weather-vaned crane built to current standards can handle out-of-service winds up to 100 miles per hour. The problem isn't the engineering, It's when the protocol breaks down, whether from neglect, mechanical failure, or simply not enough warning time before a major storm. Getting a crane through storms and hundreds of climbs is one achievement. But there's one final engineering puzzle that never gets talked about. How do you remove something that's bolted into a finished skyscraper 1,000 feet in the air? Once the building is done, the tower crane is bolted into a completed structure, sitting hundreds of feet up, and there is no crane anywhere that can reach it from the outside. Getting it down requires the same methodical thinking that got it up, just in reverse. The crane starts dismantling its own mast. Using its hook, it lifts each mast section free, lowers it to the ground, and repeats until the crane has shrunk itself down to the shortest possible configuration it can reach from the roof. At that point, it runs out of the strength needed. So, a much smaller derrick crane is disassembled into pieces compact enough to fit inside the building's freight elevator, carried up floor by floor, and reassembled by hand on the roof. This smaller machine then dismantles what's left of the main crane, lowering the cab, the turntable, and the final mast sections to the ground, piece by piece. Modern cranes now come equipped with real-time load monitoring, anti-collision systems, and remote diagnostics that track structural stress throughout the entire process, making every phase from climb to dismantling more controlled than ever. So, what do you think? Does knowing all of this change how you look at a construction site? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this as mind-blowing as we did, hit that thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Until next time, stay curious.